Welcome students. Good morning to you all. Welcome to our talk on issues of modernity. This is a sociological topic, and this topic is related to the topics of Faculty of Sociology, Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. Before we go forward, we would just like to introduce ourselves. I'm Dr. Bashum. I'm from the Faculty of Sociology, IGNOU, New Delhi. And I have with me a very special, an expert on the topic that I have just introduced, issues of modernity, and of course of modernization also. I have with me Dr. Takeoff. He is an eminent person on this topic who can deal so much on this, and who has also written lots on the issues of modernity and modernization, which includes even postmodernism and all related topics. Of course, we'll be touching on that. But I would like to say something about him, because if I don't do so, maybe I'll do lots of injustice to his, credence. Dr. Takeoff has not only written so many books on this topic and other topics also, but you may be surprised to know that he has at least 12 books to his credit, and has been going to field works. He's not just armchair anthropologist or sociologist for that matter, but he is someone who is quite related to the field experiences, and that really makes someone different, at least in sociological inquiry, because it's not only theories, but it is also the field-oriented knowledge that is important. Well, his main areas of fieldwork is concerned with the northern part of India, and of course some other parts also, but he focused his field work in northern part of India. And apart from that, it will be good to know that he is one of the pioneers of sociology faculty in IGNOU, where we are just a part of it today. And in 1980s, when sociology faculty was started, he was one of the pioneers. He was one of the founders, for that matter. And for all the courses that we have today, most of them have been already started by that time. So today we have one person who has really worked hard, who has really had some good vision for the future of the Department of Sociology, or we also call Faculty of Sociology, for IGNOU as a whole. And so you are also lucky to be part of this endeavor. And as a process of imparting knowledge, we are here today to discuss on the topic that I have just pointed out, issues of modernity, where we'll be touching many areas of this. But as it is related to our topic, this is a topic which is basically taken from MSO 001, MA in Sociology 1, and this part, the very topic that I have just said, issues of modernity, comes under book 2, and it comes under block 8, where we have 3 units, units 29, 30, and 31. So students, I think you should be aware of this, where we have taken the topic. Of course, we'll be touching here and there, and maybe we'll be touching some areas where it will be related to even BDP students also on this topic. So I think it will not be lost for BDP students to also be part of this discussion. And before we proceed into some of our discussions, I would like to request the students and listeners to pose questions if you have any, because we are told that you are scared or you are just reluctant to pose questions when such programs takes place. And this is one of the feedbacks that we have received from different regional centers. So this time around, I think you should be bold enough to ask anything, because we are ready to help you in whatever way we can. At least in this discussion, we'll try to make sense of what we are speaking and what the topic is all about. So be prepared for that. Well, we have 3 units here, which we will not go strictly by these units, but we'll go by the topic that is being placed before us. But just for some sort of systematic arrangement that we can understand better, we have 3 units. Unit 29, entitled Theories of Modernization and Modernity. And in Unit 30, we have another topic which we call it Tradition and Modernity. And the third one is Unit 31, which we call it, which is entitled Post-Structuralism and Postmodernism. So related to all these topics and the topics that is also related in some way, we'll all try to make sense. Now let's come back and orient what is issues of modernity. We have primitive societies, of course we have tradition, we have modern societies, traditional societies, modern societies, and we also have postmodern societies, post-industrial societies, and we also have concepts like post-structuralism and also postmodernism, right? So these are all concepts. It looks like it is moving in some sort of evolutionary pattern, and in some way also it looks like concepts are shifting, theories are shifting from one to another, from older ones to newer ones, and sometimes even the older ones tries to come back in some way, well, in a modified way, or maybe in a refined way for that matter. So these things are really going to interest us, and we'll try to touch some of these issues, the topics like theories of modernization, their concepts, what is modernization all about, what is modernity all about, and we'll also try to touch the idea of tradition vis-a-vis modernity, and also post-structuralism and postmodernism. And when we talk of post-structuralism also, we'll also try to speak something on structuralism also, because post-structuralism came after structuralism. It may be a critique to, as a critique to structuralism. So I think there are salient features which contradicts post-structuralism to structuralism. So maybe one can say that it is, in a way, for now, an evolved way of looking at the past or the present. Some would call it still present, because structuralism is even still now, considered as the ultimate one for some scholars. But for other scholars, structuralism cannot answer all the answers, the theoretical aspects that we would like to understand. So post-structuralism also came about. Now I think we should go in some sort of sequence. Maybe I would request Dr. Kapoor to highlight something on the topic that we have, set before us, and especially I would like him to enlighten something on what is modernization all about, and then what are the approaches that sociologists use to understand, the concept of modernization, and what are the implications of these approaches. There are different ideologies, different theories that is there, And if you can also touch something on the phases and phenomena of modernization and modernity, I think that will help the students to understand better on this topic. Maybe for now, I think we can confine on this, and we can start with the concepts, understanding concepts and the processes and the implications, and also the process of modernization and modernism. So could you please highlight the students?
Thank you, Dr. Washam. I think before I start highlighting these questions, which are, as a matter of fact, the subject of a very vast series of volumes, because the questions that Washam has raised and has set for us to cover, it's almost an encyclopedia of the issues of modernity. So I don't feel that we would be able to go very, very deeply into everything, but we could touch upon a few things. So to set the ball rolling, what is modernization? Now, modernization is a particular, to begin with a definition of sorts, modernization is a process by which a pre-modern society becomes a modern society and develops the potential of becoming a postmodern society. Suppose we begin with this. However, definitions don't cover up everything. They just provide a way in which you proceed. You make a definition and then you proceed in that manner, and it appears that you've got a theory. But as a matter of fact, the cutoff point which many other theorists in the West have used for the word modernization to be used is the Second World War. Now, the Second World War is, I think, a slightly arbitrary date, because modernization and the structures of modernization had already begun to set in by the 1900s, the early 1900s, when the aviation flights took place, and then the First World War took place. And I think that if we have to set a date from which modernization began, it would not be the Second World War, it would be the First World War, because many of the discoveries, the inventions, the features that we see in everyday life, the kind of buildings, the kind of architecture, the kind of art, the kind of social interaction, cultural artifacts, cultural events, all of these things, these processes themselves began at a much earlier date, and that is the First World War, when armaments were manufactured in very heavy doses by all the nations at war, and it was a world war, so there were alignments. This means that inventions go into first processing armaments, but there are unintended latent consequences of these activities, and this was the development of technology. Technology was developed very fast and in a very varied direction, no doubt towards destructive tendencies and destructive activities, but nevertheless a great deal was discovered. And it was in these days when Einstein's theory of relativity was also published early in the 1900s, and research began on the atom bomb. So to say that modernization began when the atom bomb dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I think that's pushing the date a bit too far. I think that this is an important point, because we lose a full 50 years or so in terms of examination of what is happening, and by no means could the 1900s be called a pre-modern society. Industrialization had set in, and factories were there, factory labor was there, the motor car had started coming into great use, aeroplanes had started making commercial flights, and education had started taking on a different turn, everything had started changing, and suddenly by around the 1950s, this change was very apparent. I think in terms of the recognition of these changes, perhaps World War II could be a date. Now, having said this, the point of it is to establish that scholars use certain different bases to start their theorization. You can use the 1900s. Early you can say the first aviation flight commercial aviation flight, I think, was in 1910 or 14 or something. One could use that as a base for the process of modernization to begin. So modernization is a process. It's a process by which, as we pointed out in our definition, our brief definition, a pre-modern society transits into the modern society and has a potential of going into a more post-modern society. And this requires certain factors. And here is where modernity comes in, because we can shift between various concepts, between postmodernism, between modernity, between tradition, between other related issues of modernity. We can shift between them, and I think in doing this we would be providing a better picture, a better collage of the situation than if we try to cover up the whole encyclopedic agenda that you have laid out for us. So I'll mention a couple of brief theories of modernization. One of the theories which was very much in fashion, and in fact had taken the world by storm in the 60s, I think it was, late 50s or early 60s, was that of Roscoe's Takeoff theory. Now this was very, very vivid kind of metaphor in which Roscoe likened the progress of modernization as a flight of an aeroplane. So there was the pre-takeoff stage, and in the pre-takeoff stage the aeroplane has to be built, the petrol has to be filled in, there have to be test flights, there have to be pilots suggesting what is happening right with the aeroplane, what improvements could be made. It's a pre-takeoff stage in an economy where if one decides to go socialist, say for example as did India, then there had to be a lot of discussion and allocation between the public sector and the private sector. So this is the pre-takeoff stage. A lot of discussion, a lot of allocation of funds, a lot of distribution, a planning stage. And then the economy moves off into a takeoff stage in which the aeroplane starts moving. The plans have been laid and everything in the economy is set, and now the work begins. Maybe of construction, maybe of making canals, maybe of making buildings, maybe of making more automobiles, whatever it is. The economy takes off and a lot of funds and economics and distribution of investments takes place, and the economy starts rolling. A lot more of goods and consumption are in circulation. They are reaching out to more and more people. And at this particular point, Roscoe talks of the flight into maturity. That once the flight has taken off, there is a strain, there is a particular pressure on the economy and on all the people concerned, and even the globe shudders with this pressure, because the world is a small place. It always was, now it's even smaller. And so once this is over, once it has made that particular breakneck effort and it arrives at a flight into maturity where the economy is functioning almost automatically. Like the aeroplane, once it has reached the top of its hyperbola, it moves much more smoothly, and the pilot has to do minimal maneuvering with the computers, with his own manual stick and so on. And then flight into maturity would mean a sort of traditional base is there, because the technology is a traditional base in many senses. Technology is new first and then it becomes traditional. And then later on the plane, that's the economy, takes off into a modern mode, a modernization mode, and becomes a candidate for post-modernization. Now this is one of the theories which was hotly discussed in the 50s, and these aviation terms were used. Today no one talks too much of Roscoe's theory, but one can see from the contours of what he said that this is one of the modernization theories which was very picturesque and could be understood by a wider section of society. And it does have some merit to it, because we do see some evidence of this kind of process happening in the West. The only problem with this, the critics of this theory, and I think I'm going on too long with it, but I just mentioned it briefly. The critics of this theory mentioned that in this way, the whole world economy, all the economies in the globe would follow one single pattern, that they would always be this pattern of A, B, C, D or whatever it is. that would there always be a pre-planning of stage, always a pre-takeoff stage, always a flight into maturity? Why not, as the postmodernists say, that the planning stage is taking place and the plans are laid so bad that when you get into planning it and executing it, your plane may not take off. You may develop a flat, it may crash, it may just not work. So there is no saying that you go from stage 1 to 2 to 3, a linear progress which reaches you to some particular destination, which is nowadays considered to be postmodern. But even as we come to that debate, we'll see that postmodern is also a hotly debated area, and there are people who are the modernists, and there is a debate going on between the modernists and the postmodernists, which is very interesting. But I think I mentioned one of the theories of modernization, and I would like to ask my colleague Dr. Vasham to talk a little bit further maybe about some more of these ones, or however he would like to develop this discussion.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Kapoor. Actually, yeah, you have mentioned most of the points, of modernization. And when you talk of this Roscoe's theory of aviation theory, I think it interests me also, like his thinking about his understanding of that modernization in terms of that concept that they had used from pre-takeoff period stage to takeoff, then to the stage of maturity or achievement. I think, like you said, there are flaws, and which you have exactly said, because many theories also have started looking at it and found some flaws that it cannot be strictly on stage to stage. It may be different for different contexts and different situations. So in that linear line, I think understanding a social evolution or social development or social modernization would be a very, doing injustice to the whole process of modernization. That's it. And when we talk of this modernization theory, I was just thinking also of that dependency theory that some people had threw up. Why people should talk only about modernization? Why people should not think about the other way around? Which I think dependency theory also, I think, did very well, I think. And I just remember Gunder's, theory of this dependency. I remember one of this metropolis satellite theory. Understanding a situation where one dominates the other, one leads the other, so that that there is some sort of binary opposition there also, because if we take metropolis as the United States, then the satellites would be maybe second world, third world, or even fourth world or fifth world. We can go on counting. It is very difficult to give the names these days, because many people use different jargons, different terminologies, and I think it has come to even fifth world also. Well, I think that metropolis satellite theory is also, I think, very important. I think in terms of this post-structural view, or this modern view of understanding social context, I think I feel quite comfortable with this idea, because Americans might say that we are equal societies, and so the world is on some sort of equal basis. But then we find that there are some people who really dominate and who even exploits in many ways, so that, and they behave, or some others tend to understand that they are a reference group, they are a model, and even the first world would think that the second world, so and so forth, would also try to look at the models that they have laid, the standards that they have laid, maybe even in terms of policies, in terms of human rights, in terms of even ethics also. So they expect the second world, third world, fourth world, fifth world are supposed to emulate the behavior and of the first world. So I think these things are going on. When we look at very closely into our everyday life, we find that I think this theory of metropolis and satellite is, I think, quite valid. It has lots of validity. I don't know if Dr. Kapoor would think in the other way, but as I see around, I think Dr. Kapoor also would agree with me that these theories are, I think, still, I think, holding water. Now, I think there are so many things that we should be talking about, and so I think without going much into the theory of modernization, I think I would request Dr. T. Kapoor to do something on the tradition vis-a-vis modernity.
Mm-hmm.
Throw some light on what is that tradition that we're talking about. What does sociology look at tradition and modernity, and they're in the relatedness. And after that, I think we can talk about the nuances of modernity, and of course modernity and rationality, whether rationality is compatible to modernity, whether there is at all rationality to modernity, or is there no rationality in traditional societies. This has also been a debate that has touched the minds of sociologists also, whether tradition is minus rationality, or rationality only attached to modernity or post-modernity or whatsoever. Maybe you can give some highlights, enlighten the students on this matter.
Thank you, Dr. Vasham. I think that the topic which you raised regarding metropolis and satellite, I would also like to, before moving on to the tradition and modernity, make a few brief comments. There is, as you pointed out, that so much realism in this kind of analysis, in which the nations of the North, specifically USA, export their culture, export their ideology, and export their technology onto the satellite nations, which are in debt. They are given this thing. It's a tied aid. It's like you have to make these kind of buildings, or you have to make that kind of industry, or you have to make that kind of factory, or that kind of organization. And so they're able to direct the flow in the satellites. And the satellite gets more and more dependent, and as a matter of fact gets more and more impoverished, because at some point in time the idea is that the satellite becomes almost a part of the metropolis. It's no longer even a satellite. I mean, that status is also gone.
Right.
Now, similarly, there's another theory in modernization theory talking about dependency in media dependency theory, which is the cultural side of this technological side and the financial and the economic aid, in which you are exporting a culture altogether through your media, through films, through newspapers, through drama, through your ambassadors, through your cultural statements, through your ideology. You want that every other nation in the world should follow that particular pattern of living, if you want their support. So there is a lot of sociology involved in this, but there's a lot of politics and geography and international relations and many other other areas also involved in this. Now moving on, I think despite the fact that there is such a lot more to be talked about in this area, moving on to tradition and modernity briefly, tradition is usually used to refer to many different kinds of traditions. It could be a tradition of music, a tradition of literature, a tradition of drama. So a tradition implies a series of rules and regulations which are developed over the time to express one particular type of art or craft in any particular area in which the society requires it. So it does have its rules, it does have its regulations, and I think there is something called traditional rationality, because to talk in terms of complete whims and fancies of tradition, I think we are seeing the wrong picture altogether. If we talk in terms of music lineages, music gharanas, there are 3 students who are excelling in the sitar, and there is one ustad, there is one maestro. Now at the time of passing on the baton, passing on who is going to be his representative primarily, the gharana master unexpectedly chooses the youngest one. Now in this kind of tradition you will say, what sort of rationality is this? He is the youngest one, he hasn't got the seniority. This is the bureaucratic way of thinking has come after tradition has ended. But the bureaucratic method, the rational method, can be used to show that tradition also has its rationality. But we would have to go through it in an ethnomethodological fashion, which is a sort of postmodern way of arriving at the truth of particular things, of particular areas. Why did one particular ustad give his inheritance, his musical inheritance, his legacy to his youngest disciple rather than the oldest and the ablest? This is a question which now the postmodernists have themselves started saying that tradition has got its own rationality. We cannot say that tradition is an aberration. Regards modernity, it is a series of structures. Just like modernization is a process, modernity is a series of structures which themselves have a process. But they have to have a structure, they have to have a bureaucratic outline. They have to have their building, their premises, their statutes, their rules, their regulations, their goals, their objectives, their mandate, their source of funds, and so on. And therefore, 6 of the most important structures which we visualize or conceptualize when we talk of modernity are the nation, industrialization, the process of democracy, technology, urbanization, and mass media. When these 6 are present, we can say that, look, we are living in modernity. These are structures of modernity. We are living in a modern society. So modern and modernity go together. Where there are structures of modernity are available, we are living in a modern society. Where the structures of modernity have transformed beyond recognition, or at least to such a point where you can't really call them modern anymore, then certain theorists and increasing numbers of thinkers are using the word postmodern. Now postmodern systems have got different kind of or should be having a different kind of value system and a different kind of structures that we'll come to later. But here we can talk about, say, the phenomena of mass media in modern society. This is one topic which we cannot get away from. We have talked about several aspects of this in several of our other programs and teleconferences, but mass media in the context of modernity means something like McDonaldization. You promote a certain culture of food, for instance, fast food, and then develop structures which are going to promote fast, efficient dispensation, hygienic dispensation of that food, and the interaction between the people concerned is going to be very smooth and mechanical, and there is no room for personal interaction. This has been called also disenchantment of the world, where human beings are not reacting and interacting with each other in terms of their own personal values, their own personal morals, norms, their ideas, their life worlds. Rather, it is a absolutely cold, clammy, and hygienic handshake in every interaction. In modern society, people have no time to sit and watch the clouds go by. They don't have no time to sit and watch and even read the newspapers. Everything is compressed and time is at a premium. I think this is one of the things that mass media points out to us, that all the people who are busy are celebrities. They are rich. And all those who are audience, the rest is audience. It has become from base to superstructure, it has become from mass and audience and celebrity. This kind of dynamism has approached us in the modern world. It is available to those who watch television. All throughout the day, a modern society is being projected by television. Films are projecting modern society. And even those films which are projecting a traditional approach to life are using modern gadgetry and modern methodology and modern means to make that come alive. So I think that it's important that we are aware of the fact that in modern times, disenchantment of the world has led to so many things, including reflexivity. If there was no disenchantment with the world, there would be no reflexivity. Disenchantment with the world has directly led gradually since the 50s, even a little earlier, to the popularization, for instance, of Indian and Mexican and Peruvian cults and religions all over America, where people go and they try to contemplate and they try to do their prayers and do their rosary and do their chanting and so on, so as to become re-enchanted with the world. After becoming disenchanted, the problem then with the postmodernists, which they haven't addressed well enough, I think, or at least head on, is that how do we make a society in which the members and the individuals of the society are re-enchanted with the world, where the situation is such where human values are predominating, where human values are being referred to all the time rather than mechanical and often malleable bureaucratic procedures. I wonder what Basham has to say about this.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just before we go to this the last main topic on post-structuralism and postmodernism, I would just like to give some comment on the question of rationality on in terms of tradition and vis-a-vis modernity. I don't really agree with some sociologists thinking that modernity is the only thing that relates to rationality. Being acquainted or associated with village lives, community lives, I find myself that there are lots of rationality in what we call traditional societies, in villages and away from the metropolis. Because when we come to the situation of metropolis or city life, we find that life has become completely different. Maybe there is another kind of rationality. Maybe life becomes faster than the life in traditional societies. The kind of life they lead is different, of course, that's quite true. Transportation is good, and there are so many things, new modern technologies. There are so many things that can add to the lives of of man. And yet, when we talk of rationality, I think there may be different kinds of rationalities that we can look at. So I think we cannot just dispel that there is no rationality in traditional societies. Of course, even in traditional societies or modern societies, or we will be talking about post-structural societies or post-modern societies, in some areas we will find that rationality is lacking, or in some areas we will also find that there are rationality, we see more rational in their operation also. So we'll have to see in terms of context and situations also. Well, I think we'll switch on to the next last main point of discussion, which I think we'll call it post-structuralism and postmodernism. You know, students, this is a very important topic, and this is one topic that is being developed. It has not been matured in a way, because I think this is an on and on process. Because post-structuralism came after structuralism, maybe after the flaws of structuralism and modernism, because some sociologists or social scientists would think that the way structuralists look at the situation of society is really something they cannot address or understand the processes of the society, the situations, in a proper way, in a holistic way. For example, if structuralists look at binary oppositions of, context of society, post-structuralists would not agree to that. They would say, why only binary opposition? There are also multiple oppositions also. There are so many individual actors also. Because it cannot be just clubbed in two ways, the has or have not, or for example, the rich or the poor. But there are so many things in between also. There are so many things. And it may not be only in terms of economic basis, even in polity also, and even in terms of technology or whatever. So I think post-structuralism has come as a way of understanding maximum differences, a structure of differentiation. I think this is one thing that we can just simply put that way so that students can also understand. And of course, postmodernism is also very close to this, and some of these nuances I think Dr. T. Kapoor will highlight in just maybe a few minutes, because I think we are almost close to our closer, Maybe in a few minutes you can give some highlights and important points.
See, post-structuralism, as to give in capsule form, is a sort of negation of structuralism's dependency on linguistic studies. Using language is one thing, but linguistic studies and their concepts were used, including binary oppositions and generalizations, to say that you can study anything under the sun. So this was not agreed to by the post-structuralists. Foucault and others, Derrida, they didn't agree to this. What they did agree to was to focus on the local context and to try and dissect that local context and see what could be done about it so that situation is more integrated, situation is functioning more efficiently, and all design faults and operator failures are removed. I think you could now sum it up by this.
Okay, well, thank you so much, T. Kapoor. Since we are almost running out of time, maybe he has made good sense of what is post-structuralism, because I think what he had said is, I think, holds very well. We can understand in just few lines also that post-structuralism is something to do with looking at context, not only just an assumption that there are only two ways, that grand theory, meta theory, whatever. These are theories which look in context, in smaller life situations in a way. And of course, that is a process to what we call a holistic look or approach to understanding situations. Well, students, you have no questions and time is almost over, but we have had, I hope, a good discussion on issues of modernity, and I'm very thankful to T. Kapoor for giving good highlights on this, of course with some inputs here and there, even from my side, maybe sometimes disturbing him. Well, I think we'll wind up with this, and students, if you have some other queries, you are most welcome, and you can write to us, or you can email to us, or you can make telephone to us. will be available to answer to your queries. And thank you so much for the day. Thank you.